poor widow was hired to clean a lonely ranch barn, but one freezing night, the rancher found his missing twin boys asleep in her arms. What happened next changed all of their lives forever. The widow in the barn. The wind rolled across the Wyoming plains like a living thing, cold and restless under the gray October sky. Dust swirled around the old ranch house standing alone at the edge of miles of empty land. The wooden porch creaked softly as a tall man stepped outside, his weathered boots thudding heavily against the boards. Ethan Walker narrowed his eyes toward the dirt road leading to the ranch gate. Another worker quit. Again. He rubbed a tired hand over his beard. The Lazy River Ranch had become impossible to manage since his wife's death 2 years earlier. Cowboys came and left. Housekeepers never stayed long after realizing Ethan barely spoke and spent most nights working until dawn. And then there were the twins. 5-year-old Noah Walker and Nathan Walker were wild as untamed horses. Sweet boys, but heartbroken. Since losing their mother, they barely listened to anyone. Ethan couldn't blame them. The ranch foreman climbed the porch steps. "Boss," he muttered, "woman's here for the barn job." Ethan frowned. "Thought I said I only needed temporary help. She says she'll work for whatever you can pay." "That usually means trouble." The foreman shrugged. "Or desperation." Ethan looked toward the gate again. A woman stood there holding a faded suitcase in one hand while the other clutched the sleeve of a little girl hiding behind her skirt. Even from a distance, Ethan could see how thin they were. The woman wore an oversized brown coat despite the weak sunlight. Her dark hair had come loose from a braid, blowing wildly in the wind. She looked exhausted. The little girl beside her couldn't have been older than 7. Ethan sighed heavily. "Bring them over." The woman removed her hat respectfully when she stepped onto the porch. "Sir," she said quietly. "My name is Clara Bennett. This is my daughter, Lily Bennett." Lily peeked shyly from behind her mother. Ethan crossed his arms. "You've worked on ranches before?" "A few." Clara nodded. "Mostly cleaning stalls, washing tack, feeding horses. You understand this isn't a housekeeper job?" "Yes, sir. The barn gets cold. We can manage." The answer came too quickly. Ethan studied her more carefully now. There was something strange about her composure. She stood straight despite obvious exhaustion. Pride still lived inside her, even after life had clearly beaten her down. "Where's your husband?" Ethan asked bluntly. For the first time, Clara's eyes flickered with pain. "He passed away last winter." Silence stretched across the porch. The foreman looked uncomfortable. Even the wind seemed quieter. Ethan finally cleared his throat. "And you brought your daughter because there's nowhere else for her to go." Lily lowered her head. Ethan noticed the child's shoes were falling apart. He looked away quickly. "You can sleep in the small room beside the barn," he said roughly. "It's old but dry." Clara's eyes widened slightly. "Thank you. You'll earn your stay. Nothing free here." "I understand." Ethan nodded once toward the foreman. "Show her the place." As Clara turned to leave, Lily suddenly looked up at Ethan. "Sir." He raised an eyebrow. "My mama works very hard." Something twisted painfully inside his chest. The little girl said it with such seriousness, like she'd spent years defending her mother against the world. Ethan swallowed hard. "I believe you," he replied quietly. The barn apartment was barely more than a storage room with a rusted stove and 2 narrow beds. But when Clara opened the door, Lily gasped softly. "Mama, it's warm." Clara forced a smile despite the tears threatening her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, it is." Only 3 nights earlier, they had slept inside an abandoned church outside Cheyenne. Before that, a train station. Before that, wherever they could. Clara sat on one of the beds slowly, exhaustion crushing her bones. Lily climbed beside her. "Do you think he's mean?" the little girl whispered. Clara looked toward the ranch house visible through the dusty window. Ethan Walker looked like a man carrying grief heavier than mountains. "No," Clara said softly. "I think he's lonely." The next morning began before sunrise. Clara worked harder than any ranch hand Ethan had ever hired. By breakfast, she had already cleaned 6 stalls. By noon, she'd repaired broken harness straps herself without being asked. And somehow, despite the endless work, she remained gentle with every animal she touched. The horses trusted her instantly. That caught Ethan's attention. Animals knew people better than humans did. Still, he kept his distance. The ranch was no place for attachment. Not anymore. 3 days later, disaster struck. Noah and Nathan disappeared. The entire ranch searched for hours. Ethan rode across fields screaming their names until panic clawed at his throat. His wife had died in a riding accident beyond the northern cliffs. Those same cliffs the twins loved exploring. Fear nearly drove him mad. Then one ranch hand shouted from the barn, "Boss, in here." Ethan jumped from his horse and stormed inside. And froze. Clara sat in the corner atop a pile of hay. Both twins were asleep against her chest. Nathan's tiny hand still clutched her coat. Noah slept curled beside Lily beneath an old blanket. The children looked peaceful, safe. Ethan stared in shock. They were hiding in the loft, Clara whispered carefully, trying not to wake them. Storm scared them. Ethan's breathing slowed. For weeks his sons had refused comfort from anyone. But now, Nathan stirred sleepily. "Daddy." Ethan stepped closer. The little boy looked up with heavy eyes. "Miss Clara sang to us." Clara immediately looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I should have brought them back sooner, but they finally calmed down." "Don't apologize." Her voice stopped. Ethan looked at the sleeping boys again. He couldn't remember the last time they'd slept without nightmares. Then his eyes shifted toward Clara. For the first time since his wife died, the ranch house no longer felt completely empty. A place at the table. The storm raged through the Wyoming plains all night long. Rain hammered against the barn roof while fierce wind rattled every window on the ranch. Inside the hay loft, the lantern burned low beside Clara Bennett as she carefully adjusted the blanket over the sleeping twins. Noah Walker murmured softly in his sleep. Beside him, Nathan Walker remained curled against Clara's side as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. Across from them, little Lily Bennett had fallen asleep sitting upright against a hay bale. And standing near the ladder below, Ethan Walker watched silently. Something about the scene unsettled him. Not because it was wrong. Because it felt painfully right. For months, his boys had screamed through thunderstorms. They hated loud noises after the accident that took their mother. Ranch hands tried comforting them before, but the twins trusted no one. Yet tonight, they slept peacefully beside Clara like they had known her forever. Ethan looked away first. "You should all come inside," he said gruffly. "Too cold in here." Clara blinked in surprise. "The house." "Yes. We don't want to impose." "You're not imposing." His jaw tightened slightly. "That's an order." 20 minutes later, Clara stood nervously inside the ranch house kitchen. The warmth hit her first. Then the smell. Fresh coffee, cinnamon, firewood. It felt like stepping into another life. Lily stared around the large kitchen with wide eyes while the twins sleepily sat at the table wrapped in blankets. An older ranch cook named Martha Green smiled kindly. "Well," Martha said, setting bowls onto the table, "looks like these children need feeding." Nathan immediately perked up. "Is that stew?" "It sure is." Noah grinned for the first time all week. Clara noticed Ethan watching quietly from the doorway. He never smiled fully, but something softer had entered his expression. Martha handed Clara a bowl too. "Oh, no," Clara said quickly. "The children first." "Your skin and bones," Martha replied firmly. "Sit." Clara hesitated. It had been a long time since someone insisted she eat. Slowly, she sat down. The twins immediately moved closer to her. Ethan noticed. So did Martha. The old cook hid a knowing smile. Later that night, Ethan found his sons asleep in the downstairs guest room beside Lily. He stared at them for a long moment. Peaceful. No nightmares. No crying. Just sleep. Real sleep. Behind him, Clara spoke softly. "I can move them back to the barn." Ethan turned. She stood in the hallway holding folded blankets. Her eyes looked tired again now that the children slept. "No," He answered quietly. Leave them. Clara nodded. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan asked, how'd you do it? She frowned slightly. Do what? Get them to trust you. Clara looked toward the sleeping boys. I didn't force them. That's simple. Children know when adults are pretending. Her words hit harder than she realized. Because Ethan had spent 2 years pretending. Pretending he was strong. Pretending he wasn't drowning in grief. Pretending his sons didn't notice. Clara's voice softened. They miss their mother very much. Ethan's throat tightened instantly. Yes, I think. Clara hesitated carefully. They're afraid everyone they love will leave too. The hallway became painfully quiet. Because she was right, Ethan finally looked at her fully. And you? He asked. What are you afraid of? Clara lowered her gaze. Not being able to protect my daughter. The honesty in her voice struck him deeply. No self-pity, no dramatic sadness, just truth. Ethan nodded once slowly. You should get some rest. You too, Mr. Walker. Ethan, he corrected quietly. Her eyes lifted slightly in surprise. Good night, Ethan. For the first time in years, hearing his own name sounded human again. The following days changed the ranch in ways nobody expected. Laughter slowly returned. Not loudly, not suddenly, but little by little. The twins followed Clara everywhere. If she cleaned stalls, they helped. If she carried feed buckets, they dragged tiny buckets beside her. Even Lily began smiling more often. One afternoon, Ethan rode back from town and stopped his horse near the barn. He heard giggling, real giggling. Inside, Clara sat brushing one of the older horses while all 3 children covered the animal with ridiculous ribbons. Nathan proudly declared, she's a princess horse now. Noah nodded seriously. Most beautiful horse in Wyoming. Lily burst into laughter. Even Clara laughed softly. Ethan stood frozen outside the doorway. The sound hit him like sunlight after years of darkness. Then Noah spotted him. Daddy. The boys ran toward him instantly. Look, Nathan shouted. Miss Clara made Daisy fancy. Ethan looked at the horse covered in crooked pink ribbons. Then at Clara trying unsuccessfully not to laugh. A strange warmth spread through his chest. Well, he said carefully, I suppose Daisy's too beautiful for ranch work now. The children erupted with excitement. Clara smiled down at the floor. And Ethan realized something dangerous. He liked seeing her smile. Far too much. That evening, trouble arrived at the ranch. A black carriage rolled across the dirt road just before sunset. The moment Clara saw it through the kitchen window, all color drained from her face. Ethan noticed immediately. Who is that? Clara's hand trembled slightly beside the sink. I was hoping he wouldn't find us. Before Ethan could respond, the front door opened. A sharply dressed man stepped inside without invitation. Victor Hale removed his gloves slowly, eyes locking onto Clara. There you are. Lily instantly hid behind her mother. Ethan stepped forward. You just walk into people's homes uninvited. Victor barely glanced at him. Clara, he said coldly, you owe me money. The kitchen fell silent. Clara swallowed hard. I told you I need more time. You've had months. Ethan's expression darkened. What's this about? Victor smirked slightly. Her late husband borrowed from me before he died. Considerable amount. Clara looked humiliated. He was sick, she whispered. We had no choice. Victor shrugged carelessly. Debt doesn't disappear because life gets difficult. Lily clung tighter to Clara's coat. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched the child shaking with fear. How much? Ethan asked flatly. Clara turned quickly. No. Victor named the amount. Even Ethan looked surprised. It was impossible for a widow to repay a loan. Victor stepped closer to Clara. You ran away instead of paying. I was trying to survive. You should have thought about that sooner. Something in Ethan snapped. Enough. The room went deadly still. Victor finally looked at him properly. And you are the owner of this ranch. Victor smiled thinly. Then perhaps you'd like to settle her debt yourself. Clara looked horrified. Ethan, don't. I asked how much. Victor repeated the number. Ethan walked to his desk calmly, opened a drawer, and pulled out cash. Clara stared in disbelief. Ethan, please don't do this. But Ethan placed the money into Victor's hand. Now leave my ranch. Victor counted it slowly with an amused expression. Well, he said smugly, looks like the widow found herself a hero. Ethan took one threatening step forward. Get out. Victor left without another word. The front door slammed shut behind him. Silence filled the kitchen. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. You shouldn't have done that. Ethan looked at her steadily. No child should be hunted over debt. Clara covered her mouth as emotion overwhelmed her. No one had defended her in a very long time. And for the first time since arriving at the ranch, she no longer felt alone. The secret in the snow. Winter arrived early at the Lazy River Ranch. By mid-November, thick snow covered the Wyoming plains, turning the entire ranch white beneath endless gray skies. Smoke curled from the ranch house chimney while horses huddled inside the warm stables. Inside the kitchen, laughter echoed once again. Nathan Walker chased Noah Walker around the table wearing oversized wool socks that kept sliding across the floor. Boys, Martha Green scolded, you'll break your necks. The twins only laughed harder. Nearby, Lily Bennett sat beside the fireplace drawing pictures with colored pencils Ethan had quietly brought home from town. At the counter, Clara Bennett kneaded bread dough while pretending not to notice Ethan watching her from the doorway. It had become a dangerous habit of his. Watching her, the way she hummed softly while cooking, the way she always checked on every child before herself, the way warmth returned to rooms simply because she entered them. Ethan hated how much peace she brought him. Because peace made a man hopeful. And hope was terrifying. Daddy, Nathan's voice interrupted his thoughts. The little boy ran toward Ethan holding a piece of paper. Look, what Lily drew. Ethan took the picture carefully. His chest tightened instantly. It showed the ranch house beneath falling snow. 4 children outside building a snowman. And beside them stood Ethan. With Clara. A family. Clara froze when she saw the drawing. Lily's smile slowly faded. I'm sorry. No, Ethan said quickly. Everyone looked surprised by how gentle his voice sounded. He crouched beside Lily. It's beautiful. The little girl relaxed again. But Clara looked away quietly, unable to meet Ethan's eyes. Because deep down, the drawing frightened her too. That evening, snowstorm warnings spread across the county. Ranch hands rushed to secure fences and move livestock before dark. Ethan spent hours outside in freezing wind helping the men. When he finally returned to the barn, he noticed light glowing from inside. And music. Soft singing. He stepped closer carefully. Inside, Clara sat beside the twins and Lily near the small stove. The children rested against blankets while Clara sang an old lullaby quietly. The same lullaby Ethan's wife used to sing. His breath caught painfully. For a moment he couldn't move. Clara looked up suddenly and stopped singing. I'm sorry, she whispered quickly. I didn't realize. No. Ethan swallowed hard. Keep singing. The children stared curiously as Ethan slowly sat beside them near the fire. And for the first time in 2 years, he listened to music without feeling broken. Later that night, the storm became violent. Wind screamed against the windows while snow buried the ranch roads completely. Around midnight, Ethan woke suddenly to frantic knocking. He opened the door to find Noah crying. Daddy. Ethan immediately knelt. What happened? It's Nathan. Fear shot through Ethan instantly. The boy grabbed his father's hand and dragged him downstairs. Inside the guest room, Nathan burned with fever beneath heavy blankets. Clara sat beside him holding a wet cloth against his forehead while Lily slept nearby. He's been getting worse, Clara said worriedly. Ethan touched Nathan's skin and cursed under his breath. The child was burning up. We need the doctor. The roads are blocked, Clara replied quietly. Outside, the storm roared like a monster. No wagon could survive it. Nathan whimpered weakly. Mama. The word shattered Ethan completely. His late wife used to sit exactly where Clara sat now whenever the boys were sick. For a second, grief nearly crushed him again. Then Clara placed a steady hand on his arm. We'll take care of him. Something about her calm voice anchored him. Hours passed slowly. Clara never left Nathan's side once. Neither did Ethan. Together they cooled the boy's fever through the long freezing night. At one point, Ethan noticed Clara shivering badly. "You're freezing," he muttered. "I'm fine." "You're not." Before she could protest, Ethan removed his heavy ranch coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Their eyes met briefly, too briefly, yet long enough for both hearts to race. Clara quickly looked down. "Thank you." Ethan said nothing, because he was suddenly far too aware of how close they were sitting. Near dawn, Nathan's fever finally began breaking. The little boy opened his eyes weakly. "Daddy, I'm here." Nathan looked toward Clara sleepily. "Miss Clara stayed all night." Ethan glanced at her. She looked exhausted beyond words. Hair falling loose, eyes heavy, still holding the damp cloth beside Nathan's bed. "She did," Ethan answered softly. Nathan smiled faintly before drifting back asleep. Silence settled over the room. Then Ethan spoke quietly. "You didn't have to do all this." Clara looked confused. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because someone should have done it for my husband when he was sick." Ethan stared at her, and suddenly understood. The pain she carried wasn't bitterness. It was love with nowhere left to go. That realization shook him deeply. 3 days later, the storm finally passed. But another problem arrived. Ethan returned from town with a grim expression. Martha noticed immediately. "What happened?" He removed his gloves slowly. "Banks threatening foreclosure on the South Fields." Clara overheard from the hallway. "The ranch is struggling that badly." Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "Been struggling since my wife died." The ranch had fallen apart piece by piece afterward. Missed shipments, failed harvests, workers leaving, medical bills. Grief made business impossible. Clara hesitated before speaking carefully. "What if we hold the Christmas festival again?" Ethan frowned. The annual ranch Christmas festival used to bring visitors from nearby towns every winter. But Ethan canceled it after his wife died. "No, Ethan." I said no. The sharpness in his voice silenced the room. Clara nodded quietly and stepped away. Instant regret hit him immediately. That night, Ethan found her alone in the barn feeding horses. Snowflakes drifted through the open doorway. "I shouldn't have snapped at you," he said awkwardly. Clara kept brushing the horse gently. "You loved your wife very much." The simple truth in her voice disarmed him. "Yes, and losing her made you stop living." Ethan stiffened slightly. Clara finally looked at him. "The festival wasn't just about money, was it?" "No, it wasn't." It was the last place Ethan had danced with his wife. The last Christmas before the accident. The last time he remembered feeling whole. Clara stepped closer carefully. "You don't dishonor someone you love by surviving them." The words hit Ethan like thunder. His eyes locked onto hers. For one suspended moment, neither moved. The snow fell silently around them, and Ethan realized something terrifying. He was falling in love again. But before either could speak, a loud crash echoed outside. Then shouting. Ethan turned instantly. One of the ranch hands came running through the snow. "Boss, what is it?" The man looked panicked. "There's a fire in the south stable." Clara gasped, and suddenly the peaceful winter night exploded into chaos. The fire in the snow. Flames tore through the south stable like a living beast. Orange light exploded against the snowy darkness while terrified horses screamed inside the burning barn. Ranch hands rushed through deep snow carrying buckets of water that instantly froze against the bitter wind. Ethan Walker jumped from his horse before it fully stopped moving. "How many horses are still inside?" he shouted. "3. A ranch hand yelled back. "Roof's starting to collapse." Without hesitation, Ethan charged toward the fire. "Ethan, no!" Clara Bennett cried, but he disappeared into the smoke. The heat hit him instantly inside the stable. Burning wood cracked overhead while frightened horses kicked violently against their stalls. Ethan coughed hard, pulling open the nearest gate. "Easy, easy." The horse bolted past him toward safety. Another beam crashed nearby. Outside, Clara's heart pounded wildly as she watched the fire consume more of the building. "Please come out, please." Ranch hands dragged hoses through the snow while sparks flew into the stormy sky. Then suddenly, a small voice screamed behind Clara. "Daddy!" Nathan Walker and Noah Walker had run from the house barefoot in the snow. Clara immediately grabbed them. "You can't be here." "But Daddy's inside," Noah cried. Clara held both boys tightly as fear twisted through her chest. Then part of the roof collapsed. Everyone shouted. And for one horrifying second, Ethan didn't come out. Inside the stable, thick smoke burned Ethan's lungs. The final horse panicked violently. Near the back stall, trapped beneath fallen wood, Ethan forced himself forward through the flames. "Come on, girl." The horse kicked frantically. A burning beam crashed nearby, barely missing him. Outside, Clara couldn't breathe. Every terrible memory returned at once. Her husband dying helplessly, being unable to save him, watching life destroy the people she loved. Not again. She looked toward the burning stable. Then before anyone could stop her, she ran inside. "Clara!" Several voices screamed. The smoke blinded her immediately. Heat wrapped around her like fire itself. "Ethan!" She shouted desperately. A crashing sound answered somewhere deeper inside. Clara stumbled through the smoke until she finally saw him struggling beside the trapped horse. Relief flooded her. Then Ethan saw her, and his face filled with fury. "What are you doing? You weren't coming out." Another beam cracked overhead. The horse screamed again. Together, Ethan and Clara shoved the burning wood away until the frightened animal finally broke free and galloped toward the exit. But the moment it escaped, the roof groaned loudly above them. Ethan's eyes widened. "Run!" He grabbed Clara's hand. They sprinted toward the doorway as burning wood crashed behind them. At the last second, Ethan threw Clara forward into the snow. Just as part of the roof collapsed where they'd been standing, the ranch hands rushed toward them instantly. Noah and Nathan burst into tears and clung to their father. "Daddy!" Ethan held the boys tightly, breathing hard. Then he looked toward Clara. She sat in the snow coughing violently, face streaked with soot. And before he could stop himself, Ethan pulled her into his arms too. For several seconds, neither moved. The snow fell softly around them while flames crackled nearby. Clara slowly realized Ethan was shaking. Not from cold, from fear. He buried his face briefly against her hair and whispered hoarsely, "You could have died." Clara's breath caught. "So could you." Their eyes met, and suddenly the world around them seemed to disappear. But then Nathan sniffled loudly beside them. "Are we all okay?" The moment broke instantly. Clara pulled away carefully while Ethan cleared his throat. "Yes," he said roughly. "We're okay." But deep down, neither of them were okay anymore. Because the feelings between them had become impossible to ignore. The fire destroyed half the stable. The next morning revealed the full damage. Burned wood, ruined equipment, thousands of dollars Ethan didn't have. Ranch hands whispered nervously about the future. Clara found Ethan alone outside staring at the wreckage. "You saved the horses," she said softly. He laughed bitterly. "And lost everything else." "That's not true." Ethan looked exhausted beyond words. "The bank already wants the South Fields. Now this." He shook his head slowly. "Maybe the ranch is finally finished." Clara stepped beside him quietly. "When my husband died," she said softly, "I thought my life ended too." Ethan remained silent, but Lily kept waking up every morning needing breakfast. A tiny smile touched her lips. "Children don't allow us to quit." Ethan glanced toward the ranch house window where the twins and Lily watched them worriedly. Something inside him softened again. Clara gently touched his arm. "We'll rebuild." "We." That single word stayed with Ethan long after she walked away. Over the next week, everyone on the ranch worked together repairing the damage. Even the children helped. Nathan carried tiny nails in his pockets proudly. Noah followed workers around offering very unhelpful advice. And Lily carefully painted signs for the rebuilt stalls. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive again. Not because the problems disappeared, but because people faced them Together. One evening after work, Martha cornered Ethan in the kitchen. "You love her." Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. "Martha, don't bother denying it." He rubbed a hand over his face. "It's complicated. Only because you keep making it complicated." Ethan looked toward the window where Clara laughed softly outside with the children. "I already buried one wife." Martha's expression gentled. "And you think loving again dishonors her?" Ethan said nothing. The old cook stepped closer. "That woman brought your boys back to life." Martha lowered her voice. "And maybe you too." Ethan stared silently out the window. Because he feared Martha was right. 2 nights before Christmas, the annual town winter dance finally returned after 2 years. The entire county gathered inside the decorated town hall glowing with lanterns and evergreen garlands. Music filled the air. Children laughed everywhere. Clara stood nervously near the entrance adjusting her simple blue dress. She hadn't worn anything beautiful in years. Then Ethan approached, and her breath caught. He wore a black ranch coat with a clean white shirt beneath, his dark hair still slightly damp from snow outside. For a moment they simply stared at one another. Nathan grinned mischievously beside Noah. "Daddy thinks Miss Clara looks pretty." Ethan shot the twins a warning look. Too late. Clara blushed instantly. Lily giggled quietly. Martha practically shoved Ethan forward. "Go ask the woman to dance before I do it myself." The music slowed softly. Ethan turned toward Clara. His voice sounded strangely uncertain. "Would you like to dance?" Clara's heart raced. Yes. He led her carefully onto the dance floor. One hand rested gently against her waist. The other held hers, and suddenly neither could remember how to breathe properly. They moved slowly beneath glowing lantern light while snow fell softly outside the windows. "You look beautiful," Ethan admitted quietly. Clara lowered her eyes shyly. "No one said that to me in a very long time." They should have. Her heart nearly stopped. Then Ethan added softly, "I'm glad you came to the ranch." Clara looked up at him. "So am I." The world seemed to disappear around them. Until suddenly, the front doors burst open violently. Everyone turned. A deputy sheriff entered the hall looking serious. His eyes landed directly on Clara. "Mrs. Bennett," he announced heavily, "I need you to come with me." The music stopped instantly. Ethan stepped forward protectively. "What's going on?" The sheriff removed his hat slowly. "There's been an accusation made against her." Clara's face drained of color. And Ethan immediately knew. Something terrible was coming. The accusation. The entire dance hall fell silent. Snow blew through the open doors behind the deputy sheriff while every eye turned toward Clara Bennett. Beside her, Ethan Walker stiffened instantly. "What accusation?" he asked coldly. The deputy looked uncomfortable. "A complaint was filed in Cheyenne this morning." Clara's hands began trembling. She already knew who was behind it. "Victor Hale," she whispered. Several people exchanged confused looks. The deputy nodded reluctantly. "He claims Mrs. Bennett stole money from him before fleeing town." Gasps spread across the hall. Little Lily Bennett clutched Martha's hand tightly. "No," she cried. "My mama didn't steal anything." Clara knelt quickly beside her daughter. "It's okay, sweetheart," but her own voice shook badly. Ethan stepped closer to the deputy. "You really interrupted a Christmas dance over accusations from a loan shark." "It's my duty to investigate and arrest her." The deputy sighed heavily. "Until the judge reviews the case tomorrow morning." The twins stared in confusion. Nathan Walker tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, what's happening?" Ethan's jaw tightened painfully. He looked toward Clara. She stood very still now, humiliation washing over her beneath dozens of staring eyes. And suddenly Ethan realized something. This woman had spent her entire life surviving people who used power against her. Not once had anyone truly stood beside her. Until now. "No." The word echoed sharply across the hall. Everyone looked at Ethan. The deputy frowned. "Mr. Walker, she's not going anywhere alone." Clara looked up quickly. Ethan moved beside her protectively. "If you're taking her," he said firmly, "I'm coming too." An hour later, The small sheriff's office felt colder than the snow outside. Clara sat quietly on a wooden bench while Ethan argued with the deputy in the next room. "You have no proof." Victor provided signed documents. "That proves debt, not theft." The deputy lowered his voice. "Between us, I don't trust Hale either. But the judge has to sort it out." Ethan rubbed his forehead angrily. Then he heard something soft behind him. Crying. He turned. Clara sat alone with tears silently sliding down her face. Not loud sobbing, not panic, just exhaustion, the kind that comes from being hurt too many times. Ethan crossed the room slowly. "You okay?" She laughed weakly through tears. "That's becoming a difficult question." He sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara whispered, "I'm tired of people looking at me like I'm trouble." Ethan's chest tightened painfully, because he knew exactly what loneliness looked like. "I don't," he said quietly. She looked at him. "I don't look at you that way." The sincerity in his eyes nearly broke her completely. Clara looked down quickly before he could see how deeply his words affected her. "I shouldn't have stayed at the ranch this long," she whispered. "Your family doesn't deserve this mess." Ethan's expression hardened immediately. "Don't say that. It's true." "No." His voice lowered. "You became part of this family the moment my boys started sleeping peacefully again." Clara's breath caught. Family. No one had called her that in years. Before she could respond, the office door suddenly burst open. The twins came rushing inside with Lily and Martha behind them. "Daddy." Nathan threw himself into Ethan's arms. Noah ran straight toward Clara. "We told Martha we weren't leaving without you." Clara immediately hugged the little boy tightly. "You shouldn't be out this late." "We don't care," Noah declared stubbornly. "Families stay together." The room fell completely silent. Even the deputy looked emotional. Clara closed her eyes briefly as tears returned. Because for the first time since losing her husband, someone still wanted her around. The next morning, the courthouse overflowed with townspeople curious about the scandal. Victor Hale sat smugly near the front in an expensive black coat. The moment Ethan saw him, rage flashed across his face. Victor smiled slightly. "Ranch struggling so badly you've started rescuing stray widows." Ethan took one dangerous step closer. "Careful," Victor murmured. "Wouldn't want your temper hurting your reputation too." Clara gently touched Ethan's arm before things escalated further. "It's not worth it." But Ethan couldn't stop staring at Victor coldly. He hated men who preyed on desperate people, especially women with children. The hearing began shortly afterward. Victor spoke confidently before the judge, painting Clara as dishonest and unstable. "She disappeared after taking money from my office," he claimed smoothly. Clara sat silently, humiliated. Then the judge turned toward her. "Mrs. Bennett, do you deny taking the money?" Clara stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." Victor smirked. Convenient answer. But Clara lifted her chin despite trembling. "Hands. My husband owed Mr. Hale money for medical treatment before he died. After the funeral, Mr. Hale came to our home demanding payment I didn't have. The courtroom listened quietly. He threatened to take our house." Clara's voice cracked slightly. "So I sold everything myself and left." Victor interrupted sharply. "And the missing cash?" Clara looked directly at him now. "You know exactly who took it." Victor's confident smile faded slightly. Ethan noticed immediately. The judge leaned forward. "Explain." Clara swallowed hard. "The day before I left town, I saw Mr. Hale's bookkeeper stealing from the office safe." Whispers spread across the courtroom. Victor snapped angrily. "That's a lie." "No," another voice suddenly called from the back. Everyone turned. A nervous older man stepped forward, removing his hat shakily. "Samuel Pike." Victor's face drained of color instantly. Samuel looked terrified. "She's telling the truth." The courtroom exploded with murmurs. Victor stood abruptly. "You fool. I took the money," Samuel admitted, voice shaking. Mr. Hale blamed Mrs. Bennett because he thought no one would defend a poor widow. Clara stared in shock. Even Ethan looked stunned. The judge slammed his gavel loudly for order. Victor glared murderously at Samuel. But it was over. The truth had finally surfaced. Outside the courthouse, snow fell softly as townspeople apologized to Clara one by one. Martha hugged her tightly. "I oughta hit that Victor myself." Lily laughed through happy tears. The twins cheered loudly, but Ethan remained unusually quiet. Clara noticed immediately. "You okay?" He looked at her for a long moment, then suddenly said something that stole the air from her lungs. "Come back home." Her heartbeat stumbled. "Ethan, the ranch." His voice softened. "The boys need you there. And me." The unspoken words lingered heavily between them. Clara's eyes shimmered slightly. Before she could answer, Victor stormed out of the courthouse furiously. His face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he shouted. Ethan instantly stepped in front of Clara. Victor pointed angrily toward Ethan. "You think you can play hero forever?" Ethan's expression turned ice cold. "No," he answered quietly. "But I can stop men like you from hurting her again." Something in his voice made even Victor step back slightly. Because for the first time since his wife's death, Ethan Walker had found something worth fighting for. And he would protect it with everything he had. That night, the ranch glowed warmly beneath falling snow. The children slept upstairs after an exhausting day. Downstairs, Clara stood alone beside the fireplace staring into the flames. Then Ethan entered quietly. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Ethan walked closer. "I meant what I said earlier." Clara looked up slowly. "I want you here." Her chest tightened painfully. "Ethan, you brought life back into this house." His voice lowered. "Into me." Tears filled Clara's eyes instantly. Because she had fallen in love with him too. Long ago. But fear still lingered. "What if this happiness disappears?" she whispered. Ethan stepped closer. "Then we face it together." The fire crackled softly around them. Snow drifted outside the windows. And finally, Ethan lifted his hand gently against her cheek. Clara closed her eyes at his touch. Then slowly, carefully, he kissed her. Soft, warm, certain, and for the first time in years, both broken hearts finally began to heal. Home at last. Christmas morning arrived quietly at the Lazy River Ranch. Fresh snow covered the Wyoming plains like silver beneath the rising sun. Smoke curled from the chimney while golden light glowed warmly through the ranch house windows. Inside, chaos had already begun. Nathan Walker and Noah Walker raced down the staircase shouting excitedly, "Presents! Wait for us!" Lily Bennett laughed while chasing after them in oversized wool socks. From the kitchen, Martha Green groaned dramatically. "If those boys knock over my cinnamon rolls, somebody's spending Christmas in the barn." The twins ignored her completely. Near the fireplace, Clara Bennett stood smiling softly as she watched the children attack the presents beneath the tree. For a moment, she simply took it all in. The warmth, the laughter, the feeling of belonging. Last Christmas, she and Lily had slept inside a freezing church basement with nothing but old blankets between them and the winter cold. Now, she stood inside a real home again. A lump formed in her throat. Then a familiar voice spoke quietly behind her. "You're crying." Clara turned. Ethan Walker leaned against the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. She quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm not." A small smile touched his lips. "Terrible liar." He handed her a cup carefully. Their fingers brushed briefly. Even now, after their kiss the night before, Clara's heart still raced whenever he touched her. The children continued laughing loudly nearby, too distracted by presents to notice the way Ethan looked at her. Like she was already part of his world. Later that afternoon, snow began falling again. The twins dragged Ethan outside to help build the greatest snow fort in Wyoming, according to Nathan. Lily followed carrying scarves for the snowmen. Clara stood on the porch laughing as the children buried Ethan in snow almost immediately. "You're losing, Daddy," Noah shouted proudly. "I noticed," Ethan muttered while brushing snow from his beard. Then he looked toward Clara, and suddenly threw a snowball directly at her. It exploded against the porch railing beside her. Clara gasped in shock. The twins erupted into wild laughter. "You started a war," Nathan yelled. Ethan folded his arms innocently. "Accident." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Oh, really?" 5 minutes later, Ethan regretted everything. Because Clara Bennett apparently possessed terrifying snowball accuracy. Laughter echoed across the ranch louder than it had in years. Even the ranch hands smiled watching from the stables. The lazy river ranch no longer felt haunted by grief. It finally felt alive again. That evening, after the children fell asleep exhausted beside the fireplace, Ethan found Clara outside near the barn. Snowflakes drifted gently around her as she stared toward the open plains. "You always disappear when things get quiet," Ethan said softly. Clara smiled faintly. "Old habit." He stepped beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara whispered, "I keep waiting to wake up." Ethan frowned slightly. "This doesn't feel real." He looked at her carefully. "What part?" Clara laughed weakly. "All of it." Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "A home, safety, people caring whether we stay." Ethan's chest tightened painfully, because she still spoke like someone preparing to lose everything again. Slowly, he reached into his coat pocket. "Then maybe this will help." Clara looked confused as he pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught instantly. "Ethan, I know the timing may seem crazy." She stared speechlessly as he opened the box revealing a simple silver ring. "But I also know I don't want another day without you here." Tears filled Clara's eyes immediately. Behind them, the barn lantern flickered softly in the snow. "You brought light back into this ranch," Ethan continued quietly. "Into my boys' lives." His voice lowered. "Into mine." Clara covered her mouth as emotion overwhelmed her. "I don't have much to offer," she whispered shakily. Ethan stepped closer. "You gave us everything we needed most. A family." The word lingered between them without being spoken. Clara finally laughed through tears. "When I first came here, you barely smiled at me." Ethan smirked slightly. "You scared me. Me. You walked into my broken life and somehow made everyone happier." Her tears slipped free completely now. Then Ethan asked the question that changed all their lives forever. "Marry me, Clara." The world seemed to stop. Snow drifting, wind whispering, her heart pounding wildly, and then finally, yes. Ethan barely had time to smile before Clara threw her arms around him. He held her tightly beneath the falling snow and kissed her deeply while the ranch lights glowed warmly behind them. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt frightening. It felt beautiful, but the best moment came seconds later. Because 3 tiny spies had been secretly watching through the barn window. The door burst open. She said yes. Nathan Walker screamed. "We heard everything." Noah Walker shouted. Lily Bennett ran straight into Clara's arms laughing happily. Ethan groaned. "You 3 were supposed to be asleep." "Nope," Nathan replied proudly. Then Noah looked nervously toward Clara. "So, does this mean Lily's our sister now?" Clara's eyes instantly filled with tears again. Before she could answer, Ethan placed an arm around her shoulders. "Yes," he said softly. "It does." The children cheered loudly. Nathan tackled Ethan in a hug while Noah hugged Clara and Lily at the same time. Martha appeared at the porch door moments later shaking her head dramatically. "Well," she sighed loudly, "about time." Everyone burst into laughter. And standing there beneath the falling snow, surrounded by the people who loved them most, Clara finally realized something. She had arrived at the ranch as a homeless widow searching only for work. But somehow, she had found a home. Please friends spot my channel, subscribe for more stories. Like, share, comment.